Let me be direct with you from the beginning, because this is where most men get it wrong without even realizing it. A woman will not walk up to you and clearly say, "I'm attracted to you, please make a move." That is not how attraction works in real life. Instead, it is communicated in a far more subtle and biological way, through behavior, timing, and especially through touch. And if you cannot read those signals, you are not just confused, you are invisible in moments where you actually had a chance. She will move on, not because she was playing games, but because someone else understood what you didn't. Here is the part that most men find uncomfortable, but it is backed by real research. A study published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior found that more than 90% of emotional communication between two people happens without words. That means while you are focusing on what she says, the real conversation is happening silently. It is happening through posture, micro movements, and most importantly, her hands. From a clinical perspective, this is not speculation. This is documented human behavior. And yet, most men are never taught how to interpret it. As a result, they miss signals that are actually very obvious once you understand the pattern. Now, let me explain something important from a behavioral standpoint. Women are not as mysterious as they are often made out to be. In fact, attraction is often extremely consistent in its physical expression. The issue is not that signals are hidden. The issue is that they are nonverbal. And if no one ever teaches you the language of nonverbal communication, then of course it feels invisible. Today, we correct that gap. What I am going to explain is based on behavioral psychology, observational studies from institutions like Harvard and Princeton, and research connected to human courtship behavior. I've also cross-referenced this with clinical body language studies and real-world observations from everyday interactions. Now, before we go into the first sign, there is something you need to understand. Not all signals are equal. Some are subtle indicators of attention. Others are much stronger indicators of emotional engagement. And the last sign in this sequence is often misunderstood completely, even by experienced men. In fact, it is one of the biggest misreads in social interaction. But we will get to that later. For now, we start with one of the most classic and biologically driven signals of attraction: the hair. When a woman is attracted to someone, one of the first unconscious behaviors that often appears is interaction with her own hair. Now, I need to be precise here, because this is where most people oversimplify it. There is a clear difference between casual grooming and attraction-driven behavior. Casual grooming is when a woman adjusts her hair once, usually due to wind, discomfort, or habit. Attraction-driven behavior is repetitive, deliberate in rhythm, and often synchronized with eye contact or conversation flow. Dr. David Givens, who has spent decades studying nonverbal courtship behavior at the Center for Nonverbal Studies, identified hair manipulation as one of the most consistent evolutionary attraction signals in humans. The reason is not psychological alone, it is also neurological. When attraction is triggered, the brain releases dopamine and norepinephrine. These chemicals increase alertness and nervous energy in the body, and that energy often needs an outlet. For many women, that outlet becomes the hands, and the hair becomes the most accessible target. So here is how this actually appears in real life. If she touches her hair once and stops, that means very little. But if she repeatedly adjusts it, twists it around her fingers, moves it over one shoulder, or exposes her neck while doing it, that pattern becomes meaningful. It is no longer random. It is body language responding to emotional stimulation. And yes, from a medical and behavioral standpoint, it is largely unconscious. She is not calculating it. Her nervous system is expressing it. And now we move into an even more revealing signal, one that is often directly connected to trust and vulnerability: the neck. When a woman lightly touches her neck, collarbone, or the side of her throat during conversation with a man, this is not a random habit. From an anatomical perspective, the neck is one of the most vulnerable regions of the human body. Major blood vessels are close to the surface. It is biologically sensitive and evolutionarily protected. So when someone exposes or draws attention to this area, it often reflects lowered defensive behavior. In behavioral psychology, this is interpreted as a trust-based signal. She is not just comfortable. She is signaling emotional safety. And emotional safety is one of the earliest prerequisites of attraction. Studies referenced by body language researchers, including work from Vanessa Van Edwards at the Science of People Research Lab, have shown a significant increase in neck-touching behaviors in women during interactions with men they find attractive compared to neutral interactions. This is not coincidence. This is consistent human patterning. From a clinical observation standpoint, many women are not even aware they are doing it. It happens in real time, during engagement, without conscious decision making. And that is exactly what makes it reliable. Because conscious behavior can be controlled, unconscious behavior cannot. So if you observe repeated neck touching, slight tilting of the head, exposing the collarbone, or gentle finger contact near the throat while she is focused on you, you are not seeing random movement. You are seeing physiological expression of comfort mixed with attraction. And once you understand that, you stop relying only on words. Because the body rarely lies in the same way speech sometimes does. Now that you understand the first two major signals, hair interaction and neck behavior, we can move into the next layer of attraction signals, where things become even more intentional and in some cases, far more obvious when you know what to look for. Now we move into a signal that is subtle, but extremely revealing when you understand how visual attention and self-awareness work together in attraction. This involves the lips. When a woman lightly touches her lips during a conversation, applies lip balm slowly, presses a finger near her mouth, or even bites her lower lip while maintaining eye contact, this is not just random self-care. It is closely tied to attention, direction, and sensory emphasis. From a behavioral psychology standpoint, the lips are one of the most visually dominant features on the human face. Research using eye tracking technology from the University of Manchester found that when men observe a woman's face, a large portion of visual attention naturally shifts toward the lips, especially when contrast, movement, or moisture is present. This is important because attraction is not only about expression, it is also about guiding attention. Women, even unconsciously, are often aware of where attention goes during interaction. So when lip-related behaviors appear during direct engagement, it amplifies a naturally existing focus point. Now, let's break this down clinically. Lip touching or lip grooming behaviors increase when emotional arousal increases. That includes excitement, nervousness, anticipation, or attraction. In those moments, the nervous system activates small repetitive behaviors as a form of self-regulation. So what looks like a simple gesture is often a combination of two things happening at the same time. First, increased internal emotional activation. Second, external visual signaling that enhances perceived attractiveness. Lipstick culture itself, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, also reinforces this. Across history, enhancing lip color has been used to simulate increased blood flow, which is subconsciously associated with vitality and attraction. So when a woman touches her lips in front of you, adjusts them, or draws attention to them while maintaining eye contact, she is not just grooming. She is amplifying a biologically relevant visual cue. Now we move into a very important behavioral category that psychologists often classify as displacement activity. This is where things become even more informative. When a woman starts fidgeting with jewelry, such as twisting a ring, playing with a necklace, adjusting earrings, or repeatedly touching accessories during conversation, this is not just habit. It is self-regulation of emotional energy. In behavioral science, this is called self-soothing displacement behavior. It occurs when emotional arousal increases beyond a baseline level, and the body needs a physical outlet to stabilize internal tension. Now, here is the key point most men miss. This behavior increases significantly in socially meaningful interactions, especially when attraction is involved. Dr. Albert Mehrabian's communication research has long established that nonverbal signals carry more emotional weight than verbal communication in interpersonal settings. And within that framework, self-touch behaviors are considered strong indicators of internal emotional engagement. So when she is twisting her ring, sliding her fingers along a necklace, or adjusting jewelry repeatedly while speaking to you, her body is processing emotional activation in real time. But there is an additional layer here that is often overlooked. The placement of jewelry matters. For example, necklaces naturally sit near the chest and collarbone region. So when a woman repeatedly touches a necklace during interaction, it draws attention toward that area without a single spoken word. This is where subconscious signaling becomes extremely interesting. It is not always intentional manipulation. More often, it is automatic behavior influenced by emotional arousal and attention focus. From a clinical perspective, this is consistent with how the autonomic nervous system responds during heightened social engagement. Now we transition from indirect self-touching to something far more direct: physical contact with you. When a woman lightly touches your arm, shoulder, or hand during conversation, this is a significant escalation in social signaling. Because physical touch reduces psychological distance between two individuals. And in neuroscience, touch activates oxytocin pathways, which are associated with bonding, trust, and emotional connection. A study from DePaul University found that even brief, casual touch during social interaction increases perceived warmth and interpersonal attraction toward the initiator of the touch. This means the act of touching is not just communication, it is influence. It increases emotional receptivity on both sides. Now, here is something important from a behavioral observation standpoint. When a woman initiates touch and receives no reaction, no acknowledgement, no eye contact shift, no subtle response, there is often a breakdown in perceived connection. Not because the touch was meaningless, but because it was not socially reciprocated. In natural interaction dynamics, touch is rarely one-directional. It is a feedback loop. So when she touches your arm and you respond appropriately through eye contact, slight leaning in, or relaxed acknowledgement, you are completing that loop. If you ignore it completely, the signal loses impact. Now we move into a very overlooked but highly consistent behavior pattern involving objects, specifically glassware or cups in social settings. When a woman is sitting across from you and begins to slowly trace the rim of a glass, run her fingers along a cup, or gently manipulate the stem of a wine glass, this is not meaningless movement. It is object displacement behavior. In behavioral analysis, this is often interpreted as redirected emotional energy. Instead of expressing attraction directly toward a person, the energy is transferred to an object within reach. This allows the emotional system to remain active while maintaining social boundaries. Former FBI behavioral analyst Joe Navarro has documented similar behaviors in high-stakes social environments, noting that object manipulation often increases during emotionally significant interactions. The key factor here is consistency. If she is not doing it before you engaged in conversation and begins doing it while maintaining eye contact with you, it becomes contextually meaningful. Because behavior is always interpreted relative to baseline. Now we shift into another important category: self-presentation adjustment. When a woman starts fixing her clothing in front of you, straightening her top, adjusting her sleeves, smoothing her skirt, or subtly repositioning her outfit, this is not random grooming. It is presentation calibration. From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, humans naturally adjust appearance when they perceive social evaluation. But in attraction contexts, this behavior becomes more specific. It is no longer general self-care. It becomes targeted optimization. She is not just checking how she looks. She is adjusting how she appears specifically in your presence. And that distinction is critical because it indicates awareness of being observed and a desire to maintain or improve visual impression. Now, as we continue forward, the signals begin to shift from indirect behaviors into more interpretive ones, where misunderstanding becomes very common. And the next category is where many men incorrectly assume disinterest, when in reality, the opposite is happening. Now we enter one of the most misunderstood signals in all of female body language, and this is where many men misread interest as boredom. When a woman rests her chin on her hand, lightly cradles her face, or keeps her cheek supported by her palm while looking at you, most people assume she is tired, distracted, or disengaged. But in behavioral psychology, that assumption is often incorrect. This posture is called facial framing, and it is one of the most emotionally revealing self-touch behaviors in social interaction. From a clinical observation perspective, facial framing typically appears when a person is both relaxed and highly engaged with what they are observing. It is not a disengagement cue. It is often a comfort-based attention cue. Now let's break this down properly. When a woman places her hand under her chin or along her cheek while maintaining eye contact, she is physically stabilizing her head in a relaxed position. But more importantly, she is unconsciously directing focus toward her own face. This increases the visibility of her expressions, eyes, and smile during interaction. In behavioral terms, this is self-framing of identity presentation. She is positioning herself in a way that maximizes visual attention on her facial features, while simultaneously staying emotionally present in the interaction. a landmark observational study by Dr. Monica Moore at Webster University, which analyzed over 200 women in natural social environments, documented more than 50 distinct nonverbal flirting behaviors. Facial framing consistently appeared among the most frequent behaviors in interactions where attraction was present. What makes this particularly important is its subtlety. It does not look like flirting in the traditional sense. There is no obvious gesture, no exaggerated movement, no clear signal. Instead, it looks calm, passive, even neutral. And that is exactly why it is often missed. From a neurological standpoint, this behavior is associated with parasympathetic nervous system activation. That means the body is in a relaxed, safe state. And safety is one of the foundational conditions required for attraction to develop. So when you see this posture during conversation, especially combined with steady eye contact and soft facial expression, you are not looking at disinterest. You are likely looking at comfort-based engagement. Now, moving forward, there is something important to understand about all of these signals combined. None of them exist in isolation. They are part of a broader behavioral pattern system. One signal alone is not enough to make a conclusion, but repeated clusters of signals significantly increase interpretive accuracy. Now we shift back into a category that involves subconscious attraction escalation. This is where a woman begins to adjust her body in ways that increase visual appeal during interaction. One of the most consistent examples of this is grooming behavior directed at presentation. This includes smoothing clothing, adjusting posture, fixing hair repeatedly after initial contact, or subtly repositioning accessories. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, this behavior is linked to mate evaluation context. When a person becomes aware of being observed by someone they find socially or romantically significant, self-presentation becomes more refined. This is not conscious performance. It is automatic behavioral optimization. Now, let's clarify something important here. If a woman was already adjusting her appearance before interaction, that is baseline grooming behavior. But if these adjustments begin only after engagement starts, the context changes. It becomes response-driven behavior, meaning her nervous system is reacting to your presence. And that is a critical distinction in behavioral analysis. Now we return briefly to a very important physiological mechanism that connects many of these behaviors together. It is called emotional arousal regulation. When emotional intensity increases, whether due to attraction, excitement, or nervous anticipation, the body often releases excess energy through small repetitive actions. These can include touching hair, jewelry, manipulation, object interaction, or self-soothing gestures. From a neuroscience perspective, this is the autonomic nervous system maintaining balance. It is not intentional communication. It is physiological regulation that happens to be observable externally. Now we move into a category involving external object interaction again, but with a slightly different interpretation layer. When a woman interacts with a glass, cup, or object repeatedly during conversation, especially while maintaining eye contact intermittently, this often reflects a dual-focus state. Part of her attention is on the conversation. Part of her attention is managing internal emotional stimulation. Object interaction becomes a grounding mechanism. In behavioral studies of social interaction, this pattern increases significantly in situations where emotional engagement is elevated but not yet verbally expressed. Now, let's connect this to something important. Attraction is rarely expressed through a single dominant behavior. Instead, it emerges through clusters of microsignals. Hair manipulation, lip attention, jewelry fidgeting, object interaction, posture adjustment, and facial framing all work together as part of a larger behavioral system. When multiple of these signals appear in the same interaction, the probability of emotional engagement increases significantly. But interpretation must always remain context-sensitive, because human behavior is influenced by personality, environment, and situational stress. Now, as we continue forward, we move toward more direct forms of physical signaling, where personal space boundaries begin to shift. And these are some of the clearest indicators when correctly understood. Now we move into a stage of behavior where things become significantly more direct, because we are no longer only analyzing self-touch or object interaction. We are now looking at how she interacts with you physically. This is where attraction, if present, starts to cross into the personal space boundary. And in behavioral science, personal space is not random. It is a deeply structured psychological zone that reflects comfort, trust, and social intention. When a woman initiates light physical contact during conversation, such as touching your arm, briefly resting her hand on your shoulder, or tapping your hand while speaking, this is not casual behavior from a neurological standpoint. It represents a reduction in social distance, and that reduction is meaningful because humans are highly sensitive to physical boundaries. A study conducted at DePauw University found that even brief, non-invasive touch during social interaction significantly increases perceived warmth, trustworthiness, and emotional connection toward the person initiating the touch. This means touch is not just expression, it is influence. It changes how the other person feels about the interaction in real time. Now, let's understand what is happening internally. When she touches you, her nervous system is not simply sending a social signal. It is also testing responsiveness. She is observing your reaction. Do you withdraw? Do you stay neutral? Do you acknowledge it? Do you mirror it? These responses matter because they shape the emotional direction of the interaction. From a behavioral perspective, touch creates a feedback loop. She initiates a physical signal. You respond emotionally and physically, and the interaction either strengthens or weakens based on that exchange. Now, here is something important from a real-world observation standpoint. When a woman touches your arm and receives no reaction, no shift in eye contact, no subtle acknowledgement, no change in posture, the signal loses its emotional effectiveness. Not because the touch itself is meaningless, but because social communication requires reciprocity. Without feedback, the loop breaks. Now let's move into a less obvious but very consistent behavioral pattern involving objects again, specifically in social drinking or cafe environments. When a woman is sitting across from you and begins interacting with her glass, tracing the rim, lightly spinning it, or slowly running her fingers along the surface, this is not meaningless fidgeting. This is object displacement behavior. In behavioral psychology, object displacement occurs when emotional arousal needs a physical outlet but cannot be directly expressed toward the source of stimulation. So instead of directing that energy toward the person she is engaged with, it gets transferred to a nearby object. Former FBI behavioral analyst Joe Navarro has documented this type of behavior in numerous observational contexts, noting that object interaction often increases during emotionally significant conversations, but context is everything here. If she was not doing this before you began engaging her, and it starts during your interaction, especially alongside eye contact and conversational engagement, it becomes meaningful. Because behavioral interpretation always depends on baseline comparison. Now we transition into another category that is often underestimated. This involves self-presentation adjustments during interaction. When a woman begins fixing her clothing while talking to you, smoothing her top, adjusting her sleeves, repositioning her outfit, or subtly correcting her appearance, this is not just grooming. This is presentation calibration. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, humans naturally adjust their appearance when they feel observed. But in attraction-related contexts, this adjustment becomes more focused and responsive. It is no longer general self-maintenance. It becomes targeted refinement. She is not just ensuring she looks presentable. She is optimizing how she appears specifically in your presence. This distinction matters because it reflects awareness of social evaluation combined with increased personal relevance. Now let's connect this with what is happening neurologically. During attraction or heightened social interest, the brain increases focus on self-monitoring behavior. This leads to repeated micro-adjustments in posture, clothing, and grooming. It is not planned. It is automatic. Now we move into another layer of subtle but important behavioral indicators. These involve repeated self-touch behaviors that overlap with emotional regulation. Hair adjustments, jewelry manipulation, lip touching, and even minor object interaction all serve one underlying function. They regulate internal emotional activation. From a neuroscience standpoint, when emotional arousal increases, the autonomic nervous system attempts to restore balance through repetitive physical behavior. This is why these actions cluster together during emotionally charged interactions, not because they are coordinated signals, but because they share a common physiological source. Now, here is where interpretation becomes more advanced. It is not about identifying one gesture. It is about identifying behavioral patterns across time. If multiple self-soothing behaviors appear consistently during your interaction, it suggests elevated internal engagement. But again, interpretation must remain grounded. Because context, personality, and social comfort levels all influence behavior expression. Now, as we move forward, we begin entering the most commonly misunderstood category in this entire system. This is where men often misread disengagement as attraction or attraction as disengagement. And the next set of signals will challenge a lot of assumptions people usually make in real-time interaction. Now we reach the final and most misunderstood layer of this entire behavioral system, where interpretation mistakes happen the most. Because this is where many men assume a woman is not interested, when in reality, she may be highly engaged. And everything depends on correctly reading facial behavior in a relaxed, natural state. One of the strongest yet most misread signals is facial framing. This happens when a woman rests her chin on her hand, lightly supports her cheek, or holds her face in a relaxed position while looking at you and listening. Most men interpret this as boredom or disengagement, but in behavioral psychology, that assumption is often incorrect. Facial framing is not a withdrawal behavior. It is a focus and comfort behavior. From a clinical observation perspective, it appears when a person is both mentally engaged and physically relaxed in an interaction. It reduces muscular tension in the face and neck while maintaining visual attention on the other person. In simple terms, she is comfortable enough to stay still while still fully paying attention. Doctor. Monica Moore's landmark observational research on nonverbal flirting behavior documented facial, self-touching, and chin resting among the most frequent behaviors displayed by women in engaged social interactions, men they found attractive. And that detail is critical, because it directly challenges the common misunderstanding that stillness equals disinterest. In reality, stillness can often indicate the opposite. Now let's break down what is actually happening internally. When a woman frames her face with her hand, she is unconsciously drawing attention toward her facial features, eyes, expressions, and emotional reactions. This increases the visibility of emotional engagement. It is a form of self-presentation through stillness rather than movement. From a neurological standpoint, this behavior is associated with parasympathetic activation. That means the body is in a relaxed state, not a defensive one. And relaxation is one of the core conditions required for emotional connection to deepen. Now, here is where most misinterpretation happens. Men often look for active signals, movement, laughter, overt engagement. But in many real interactions, especially deeper or more comfortable ones, engagement can look calm, still, and observant. So, if she is sitting across from you, chin resting on her hand, maintaining eye contact, and responding softly to what you say, she is not disengaged. She is likely attentive, comfortable, and processing the interaction on a deeper level. Now we connect everything together, because no single behavior in isolation defines attraction. It is always the pattern that matters. Hair adjustments, lip touching, neck exposure, jewelry fidgeting, object interaction, arm contact, clothing adjustment, and facial framing all operate as part of one integrated system. Each one reflects a different layer of emotional activation. Some indicate nervous energy. Some indicate comfort. Some indicate trust. And some indicate direct social testing of response. But the key principle across all of them is this: the body expresses what words often do not. And in many cases, it expresses it earlier. Now, here is the most important takeaway from everything you've learned. These signals are not tools for assumption. They are tools for awareness. Because human behavior is complex and context always matters, a single gesture does not guarantee attraction. But a consistent cluster of these behaviors during interaction significantly increases the likelihood of emotional engagement. Now, if you take nothing else from this entire breakdown, understand this: attraction is rarely announced. It is revealed slowly, through behavior, through repetition, through unconscious action, and most importantly, through touch. So the next time you are speaking with someone and you notice repeated hair adjustments, soft lip contact, subtle jewelry fidgeting, light arm touches, or calm facial framing, do not rush to a conclusion. Observe the pattern. Respond appropriately. Because in real life, communication is not only spoken, it is lived through the body. And finally, here is what most men never realize. Understanding these signals is only half of the equation. The real challenge is knowing how to respond when you see them, because recognition without action changes nothing. And that is where most missed opportunities actually happen.